Welcome to Inspiring Heartfelt Conversations, presented by In Autumn's Cocoon, in which we explore a range of end-of-life topics with noted professionals. My name is Barbara Morningstar. Today, I have as my guest Dr. Karen Wyatt. She is the best-selling author of the book 7 Lessons for Living from the Dying, which contains stories of patients she cared for as a hospice doctor and the spiritual lessons she learned from them at the end of their lives. Welcome, Karen.
Thank you, Barbara. It's such a pleasure to be here with you.
Yes, you too. And there's so many wonderful stories about people you told in this book that we really want to celebrate today in this interview. So I'm actually going to start with a really tender question. What was the impact of your father's death on your life?
Well, it it really changed everything in such a dramatic way. I had this notion before he died that I was practicing medicine out of love, and that love is what heals, and that's what I was bringing to medicine. And that was actually shattered temporarily by my father's death, because he was one of the people I loved more than anyone. And the fact that I couldn't save him from suicide was devastating to me. To think that everything I'd studied, everything I had learned, my whole spiritual life was not enough to make a difference and save his life. So it really threw me into a conundrum for a while, because I had to, let go of everything I had believed in, everything that I thought my life was about for a while. And while I went through this deep grief over Dad's death. And then it was around 3 years later that I ended up going to hospice, at first as a volunteer, partly thinking maybe if I just immerse myself in death and dying, I will come to understand it better and understand this grief I was feeling. And that's when it changed my whole career path. It changed everything. And I really became so much deeper spiritually. So what I thought was love that I was practicing before my dad died, I could look back later on and say, oh, that was just the surface. It was love after he died, and being able to love through a broken heart and through all the pain of grief and of his death. That was the real love that I had been meant to practice all along.
Well, your book highlights 7 principles or lessons in living. So what has suffering taught you about life?
Well, this was a really key lesson for me in trying to live with and recover from my grief over my dad's death, because as I was going through it, I wanted more than anything for it to just go away. And every day I would wake up and think, one day I'm going to wake up and I'll feel exactly like I did before he died. I'm going to go back and everything will be like it was before. And what I was doing was rejecting the suffering that was present in my life. I was refusing to accept it and wanting to just go backwards in life. So the key lesson for me, and my hospice patients help teach it to me, is that you have to face the pain. You have to be willing to face it and live with it and go through it every day. You can't spend your time and energy trying to make it disappear. And as soon as I learned that, by observing how my patients handled their own dying process, I was able to finally just sit with my grief and let it be there. And that's how I began to find my way through it and how to grow with my grief. I guess I could say that. So it taught me that pattern for future difficulties also, to just be willing to be with them and allow them to be present and not try to reject them.
So moving in more deeply into one of the stories that you highlight in the book about holding the space for people through that, there's a a beautiful story about Ruby. Could you share Ruby's story with us?
Yes, yes. This was really a delightful story for me. Ruby, when I met Ruby, she was in her 80s and she was dying of heart disease, but she was also blind. And she was very
Mm.
excited to tell me this story of her life, that she had been a single mom for much of her life, working very hard, raising her children. And when she was in her 50s and finally they were off as adults on their own, she had discovered that she had artistic talent. She started doing watercolors and drawings. Then she started weaving. She bought a weaving loom. So she would draw and watercolor these beautiful pictures. Then she would actually weave them. And she had amazing tapestries that I saw at her house that she had woven from original drawings that she had done. She did that for a number of years and felt very fulfilled as an artist to be able to do the weaving, but began having trouble with her eyesight and was diagnosed with macular degeneration that the doctor told her at that time was progressive and that she would eventually be blind. So she rapidly started losing some of her eyesight. She could no longer do the weaving because she couldn't see well enough the threads to be able to manage them. And so she wasn't sure how she was going to survive without this artistic outlet she had developed for herself, but heard about a class in wood carving, which to me sounded really dangerous for someone who couldn't see well. But she told me she took the class and that she could actually hold the wood right in front of her eyes and she could see. And she used little carving knives and started making really beautiful images and wood carvings in this class. And again, she was extremely talented, and her teacher told her that she was the best student he had ever worked with in wood carving. So she did that for a number of years, which made up for losing her weaving. But ultimately, again, her eyesight kept diminishing, and one day she woke up and couldn't see at all. And she became despondent for a short time because she thought, now I have nothing. Now the wood carving is gone, and without eyesight, there's nothing that I can do to be creative. And she really thought at that point that she might as well just die. But her wood carving teacher came to visit her and brought her a lump of clay and said, one day maybe you will try working with this and see how that feels to you. And she let the clay sit for a while she was feeling despondent and depressed, but then one day picked it up and started just molding the clay with her hands. And before long was making sculptures out of clay that she couldn't see with her eyes. She could only feel them with her hands. And so I got to see this artwork in her home, which was incredible. So these pieces that she made with her hands that she never saw for herself, she couldn't see them, but they were incredible. And her wood carving teacher took them back to the art studio and had them put through a kiln for her. But she told me, I just marveled that she was able to continue to find a way to be creative no matter how much she lost, how many losses she had. And she told me that she actually believed her blindness was a blessing to her because she discovered a new way of seeing from within that she never would have found had she continued to be able to see externally. And so she was making these images that she could see internally with her hands and didn't need her eyesight to do that. So she just inspired me that there's always a way, there's always a way to continue to love life and be creative and to bring what we have inside of us to the world and to bless the world.
I thank you for sharing. I actually have someone very close to me right now in her 80s who's losing her eyesight. And I said to her, there's such a beautiful story in this book that Karen shares that I'm hoping that she will elaborate on. So I know firsthand how difficult, because vision is such a huge part of who we are. And the way you share her deeper exploration of an inner vision and knowing is quite profound from a change in attitude. So it also makes me think of how at end of life where the patients are constantly having to let go.
Yes. Yes, it's really dramatic. It's one thing after another, one faculty, one sense, one physical ability after another, just constant losses almost on a daily basis. And for me, that was something very profound to witness how my patients coped with that. And in addressing just some of my own fears about aging, my own fears about when my physical body changes and watching that happen and how would I handle it. But it felt wonderful to me to have these patients who were really mentors and role models showing me, but it's possible. It's possible to still have a beautiful life and to still experience love and joy and gratitude, even when you're losing everything that you thought was important to you before.
Mhm. Well, thank you for that. So we're going to move into the next question around the principle of love. What is the Love Project? Tell me about the Love Project.
Well, I mentioned that when I started medical school, I came to medical school very idealistic and with this belief that love is the power that heals. And so on my first day of medical school, in fact, the very first day, I can't believe right away this happened. They divided us up into small groups where we met with a faculty member and we went around a circle and just talked about why we were there and why we wanted to be doctors. So I announced to everyone, I had this like epiphany that love is really what heals people and that I want to be a doctor so that I can bring love. I can heal people with love. And everyone in the circle was staring at me with their mouths open, including the faculty member, like, what? What are you talking about?
Ooh.
And I suddenly realized in that moment, like, this is not something that medical people normally talk about. This is not how people think in this profession. And I knew like I have to take this underground in a way. And so in my mind, I was carrying out my own love project really by continuing like in my own way to bring love to every patient that I met and to see them during all my medical training, medical school and residency, but not able to talk about it or tell anyone else that. And then it was years later when I had my own practice, I was able to love my own patients there, and including I worked at a shelter for abused women and children, and that's where I really recognized that love was honestly loving them was the only thing I could really do that would actually help them. In addition, I mean, sure, if they need a prescription for a medication, that's fine. But that to actually change their lives, love was what they needed that could help them heal their woundedness and transform.
And so how did you prepare yourself or bring that intent in? Is there sort of a practice you did as a physician to set that up to come into each moment or?
Yeah, it all came from a lot of my own spiritual work over time. Really, I'd been reading books for a long time, reading about love in particular, because that was so important to me as a lesson. And then I had started a meditation practice, and I did yoga. So and I also journaled. So I spent my own time privately working on it, and even understanding that I had to deepen my own capacity to love people. And it was clear to me that I would meet a lot of people that were harder to love.
Mhm.
There's some people that are very easy to love, but I would continue to meet people that would challenge me, that I would conflict with or clash with or feel even repulsed by, that I would need to work on loving them. So I would always come back after a clinic, come back home, and I'd contemplate, like, what did I feel today? Where do I need to open up more? And how do I need to deepen myself in my own heart so that I can bring more love to the situation? So it was a lot of work that I did outside of the exam room that helped me when I was in the room with the patient.
Well, and I want to deeply honor you on this as a physician for taking that on. When my husband was dying, I remember him being on the palliative unit, and he was a deeply spiritual man in his own right, and but it was a tough unfoldment because of the pain. And I remember walking into his room one day, and he was weeping, and he didn't normally cry a lot. And I said, "What's going on, honey?" And he said, The doctor was beautiful." And I said, "What happened?" And he said his heart was so open today. He said, "I could literally feel the love from his heart coming around the curtain before he came around the curtain."
Wow.
And then because they're so sensitive at end of life, right? And he said he was beautiful. I have never seen him that open before. And he just was weeping at the beauty of the doctor's open heart. And I knew the doctor and ended up phoning him after and saying, "Don't you ever think that you're bringing love to this moment isn't powerful." So I'm celebrating you for the gift in that, as a
Wow.
physician, to be aware of that and to what it actually can translate into in the most subtlest yet profound ways.
That's really powerful for me to hear because I always understood what I was experiencing, but couldn't necessarily tell how the patient felt about it or what they were experiencing on the other side. So it's beautiful to hear that from you, that perspective.
Yeah, he was just weeping, and he didn't normally cry like that. And he just said he was beautiful, Barb. He was beautiful.
Oh wow. Wow.
So to know, for every doctor or nurse, even in a moment, if you bring that love as you did and with your intent, how profound that can be, especially in that sensitive time.
Hmm.
Thank you for
Wow.
that.
That's
Thank you for that.
very powerful.
Hmm. Okay, so there's a story in your book about a long-term hospice patient. What's Glenda's lesson for us? It was quite a beautiful story as well.
Yeah, this was another amazing story. I learned so much from this story. And Glenda was a woman with ovarian cancer who had decided against treatment because the cancer was advanced enough, and the oncologist really talked to her honestly about the likelihood of whether or not treatment would make a difference. And so she decided no treatment. She was single, she'd never been married, had no children and no family really. And she just felt like, then if it's my time to go, I'm ready to go. So she came right to hospice and hadn't had any treatment for her cancer. Um, and so we expected that she would live at the most about 6 months with her cancer. That's what the oncologist had prepared us for, to provide care for her. So we just sent in our nurses and home health aide, and she was actually doing fairly well when we first admitted her. So we were prepared for her to begin to decline and have more pain. But in fact, she didn't decline. And after 1 year, we received notification from her insurance company they weren't paying for hospice anymore because she couldn't possibly need hospice. She'd been alive for a whole year when we thought she would die much sooner. And so she ended up getting transferred off of our service, but she went back to the oncologist who could find no trace of the cancer at that point. So I went to visit her because I was fascinated. I had to talk with her one more time, and went to just ask her, like, what had she done? What had this year been like for her? And what is it that she had done? And her only answer was, I forgave everyone. And I said, what do you mean by that? And she said she thought about the people in her life that she had resentment and bitterness toward, and decided she didn't want to die with that kind of anger inside of her. So she started working on forgiving those people, forgiving things that had happened in the past and events that had been hurtful to her. And that after she had done that for a while, she decided to start expanding the circle of forgiveness. She was working on it every day. And she would read a story in the newspaper about someone who had done harm to another person. And she decided, I could forgive them. I could forgive that person. I don't even know them, but I could forgive them for what they've done. And she began to, every day she would have a list of people to forgive or events to forgive that were happening in society, not just to her or in her own life, but her practice kept broadening and broadening. And so when I visited with her, she was just glowing, and she just had such a beautiful spirit. And I saw the power of forgiveness, and that, I don't want to give false hope or something that, anyone who decides to forgive will heal their cancer. But the fact that when we hold resentment and we hold on to anger and bitterness and hatred, it is hard on our physical health. And forgiveness, it helps us in every possible way, physically, emotionally, spiritually, when we practice it. So her story convinced me I need to start forgiving people right now, because I already was aware of a list in my head of people that I was maintaining a lot of negative stories about certain people in my life. So after hearing Glenda's story, I realized that's something I could do every day. Every day I could decide what do I need to forgive today? What can I work on today that will help me just let go and not carry this anger with me?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that was the power of the story for me too, the depth, because she was not doing this with an intent to heal herself.
No, that's what was so remarkable. She had no idea that her cancer would be healed by doing it. So it was so pure, such pure intent. She simply wanted to find peace before she died. And so that reminded me, forgive without expectations of what the outcome of that will be, simply because it's the right thing to do, and it's the way to finding more peace in life is to be able to let go of that anger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I would have to say I did the same thing. I started making a list after that. Okay, I think there's some work I need to do here, but then, it was a beautiful lesson, because I really took it inside and thought, wow, I mean, this woman really held that with the purest of intent. And how would that feel if I did that with everyone I'm feeling an element of conflict with, or who I've struggled with, a lesson around, something I needed to learn. And it was a very different sense to hold it to that depth.
Yeah, it pointed out to me how much I even hold negativity toward strangers, people I've never met. I read a story on the internet, and I'm feeling negative about a person that I heard about in the story, and made me realize that's not good for me. I don't need to do that. Why? I don't even know that person. And every day to be conscious of those situations in which I'm likely to carry away from it negativity or bitterness, and just try to resolve it in the moment instead of carrying it into the next day and the next.
Mm-hmm. Well, before the interview, before our conversation, it was with Dr. Bruce Grayson, and he talked about the life review, and it's felt on both sides. By the person, there was a review, but then they felt the impact on the other person of their actions. They were actually in the shoes of the other person receiving it. So when I listened to the part on forgiveness in your book, I thought, how does that feel on the other person's side? And we don't know their whole story to have brought them to that moment too, right?
Yes, exactly. Yes, I had a woman, this is a story you haven't heard before probably, but that I was working with, who had a conflict with her daughter, and her daughter hadn't spoken to her for a couple of years, and she had tried to reach her, tried to call her on the phone and leave messages, and her daughter would not respond and wouldn't answer the phone when she called. So she asked, what can I do? And I said, maybe you need to practice something like Ho'oponopono, which allows you to say, to say and do the work of saying, I love you, I forgive you, please forgive me, and, I'm sorry and thank you. And you can do it at a distance, but you can envision your daughter, but do it at a distance. And so she took up this practice every day of imagining her daughter and going through these phrases. And within about a week, her daughter called her on the phone. And so for me, that was another powerful example that we don't necessarily have to be face to face with the person that we're trying to experience forgiveness with. We can practice it at a distance, and it does have an impact on the other person.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Okay, the next is about the present moment, and caregiving can be particularly challenging. So, can you tell us what impressed you about how Doris handled it?
So Doris she was such a beautiful, beautiful lady. And I visited her in her home, and she was caring for her husband with end stage Alzheimer's. So she had already had a pretty long journey of caregiving for him. And he was in a hospital bed and hadn't spoken for quite some time. She gave him total care 24/7. And but when I came to meet her and expecting she might be burned out, she might be angry or bitter about how her life was completely consumed as a caregiver, but she was just so happy and so gracious and filled with joy. And she told me that she viewed caregiving as the ultimate opportunity to give love to her husband. And she said, all of our marriage, she said, she said there were more limited ways that I could show him my love. Caregiving has been the way that I could show him the depth of my love. And she said, it's a privilege to be able to care for him. And so that was phenomenal for me to see her interpretation and the mindset and the attitude that she had about caregiving, but also a lot of it was her ability to just be in the present moment, to be with him, whatever was happening right now. And there was a little story involved in that about a deer that came into the backyard, and I didn't know if you wanted me to include that.
Yeah, but, absolutely.
When her husband had been, months prior, when he was still awake and able to look around, there had been a deer that would come into their backyard every afternoon, and her husband loved watching the deer. And at this point, though, her husband was no longer really conscious during the day or able to look out the window, but she now would wait for the deer every day and look out at the deer and just simply spend part of her day watching the deer like her husband had. And it was this really heartfelt connection that she had with him, but also just her ability to enjoy in this moment whatever was there for her, whatever was available to her, and finding love and beauty in everything.
And you talk about specific gifts from when people actually do anchor in the present moment, gifts that come from that practice. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Well, let's see if I'm not sure if you want me to name specific ones from the book, which I might not be able to do.
Well, just spontaneously what you've witnessed.
Yeah, just the ability to be calm and to be still when you've practiced presence, to tolerate when things go wrong and frustrations happen in life, but to go into this state of stillness in the present moment and to recognize around you that everything's actually okay right now in this moment. Something is going wrong, but I'm still here. I'm still breathing. I'm in this moment. The sun is shining. There's a roof over my head. It's okay. So when you've learned how to experience presence, then you can tolerate and be much more resilient when things do go wrong, because your mind doesn't rush into the future with too much worry and anxiety, or into the past with regrets and wishing that you had done something differently. You simply appreciate what's around you right now in this moment.
Mm. Well, and you highlight, there's such a beautiful quote from Thich Nhat Hanh that you highlight. And and the quote is, every day we are engaged in a miracle. We don't even recognize a blue sky, white clouds, green leaves, the curious eyes of a child, our own two eyes, all a miracle.
Mm.
I,
I
do
love
you
that.
want?
Yeah, I love the mindset and being able to see the beauty in the tiniest things that are around us in life. And I know, well, I try to go out in nature every day because that's often where I just feel surrounded by miracles everywhere I look. And even if I'm walking on the beach, sometimes I'll see just a piece of seagrass that washed up, but that is in this really beautiful shape, almost like a wreath. And it's just nature. The ocean deposited that piece of grass on the beach, but to appreciate just how lovely it is, and how the shells arrange themselves that have been washed out on the beach. And then even in the forest, the pine cones that fall off the trees and how amazing they are, the symmetry of all the little seed coverings on a pine cone. I can just get lost forever in nature, looking at the beauty that's there. But then trying to also apply it to the mundane aspects of day-to-day life. The soap bubbles in the sink when I'm washing the dishes, noticing just every tiny thing around me and making sure that I see how amazing it is and how fortunate we are to get to be here to experience this.
It's almost bringing back romance into the engagement of life, but with a depth to it, not the wild romantic hormone phase of a relationship, like a deep romantic kind of flavor that has dimensions that are rich, right?
Yes, yes, which in a way was part of Doris's story, taking care of her husband, and just the depths of love that she felt for him, but also felt from him as she cared for him, like their love getting deeper and deeper with each moment, and how amazing that can be in a situation of caregiving when one person is able-bodied and the other is near the end of life.
Well, my mom died of Alzheimer's, and she had it for over 12 years, and my father would buy her flowers
Mm.
on every occasion right until she died. And they were both in their 90s when they died, and we'd sing her songs and we'd follow her metaphoric language, whatever it meant. And there was a magic in that, watching him and watching them together. You would get how often do we highlight the beauty of that kind of love now? It's the Hollywood romance that's youthful and really short-lived often and superficial, but the depth of that kind of commitment in love,
Mm-hmm.
to witness it and have the privilege of that, and even feeling that when my husband was dying, it's different, it's breathtaking, it's a deep love. um, I'm sure you've witnessed
Yeah,
that
and
too.
when you're there for you're there for every moment of it, for every difficulty and every challenge of it. But it's the love that helps you live with the difficulties and transcend the difficulties. But you get rewarded so much by being there for that and being a witness to it.
Well, and it's a deeper intimacy than can be explained until you've really experienced it, right? Because all the superficial stuff is being taken away to the heart of a connection that's pure. And it's like a mother and a child. It's in all of us if we open to it, right? So,
So true.
yeah.
So true. I think that's one thing that makes it's almost hard writing the stories that you've told and that I've told, because some of that experience is so ineffable. It's hard to put it into words. And we've both been a witness to it with others and experienced it in our own lives. And yet it's very hard to describe to someone who hasn't been there and hasn't seen it.
Hmm. Well, it kind of raises tears because of the depth of beauty and how breathtaking it can be, right?
Hmm.
But you're right, the words just don't capture it, right?
Yes.
So, moving into another principle of purpose, you have a chapter on purpose. I know people put so much pressure on themselves to find the purpose sometimes. But you have a beautiful story about Ashley. So, what was it that touched you so deeply about Ashley?
Well, to begin with, I myself had, for my whole life, gone through the same kind of seeking that a lot of people do, wondering, what am I here for? What's my purpose? What am I here to do? And becoming a doctor had always been part of what I viewed as my purpose. But I had a lot of fears around it. Like, what if I can't become a doctor? What if I'm not good at it? What if I don't like it and that's my purpose? And what if I don't fulfill it? So I'd already had a lot of thoughts about this, about how do we figure this out? How do we find what our purpose is? And and so I'd been contemplating that maybe it really isn't about career pathway, but what is it then if it isn't about the job that I have? And so I went to visit Ashley, who was a patient. She was 20 years old at the time, but she had had a neuromuscular disease since the age of 2 that had really hindered her growth and development. And so cognitively, she had not developed past the age of 2. And her parents, she had required total care from her parents during all of these years, and many children die at a younger age than she was at age 20, but her parents had given her such amazing care over the years. She was still with them, but we were now caring for her because her body was beginning to approach death. So she had been admitted to our hospice. So anyway, when I went to visit her and her parents, myself as a mother, I wondered, what must it be like for these parents who had had a child who had never really had a normal life in any way, a child they'd cared for all of these years and given her total care, but she'd never had a normal childhood. She'd never gone to school, never played with friends. Their whole life with her had been consumed with caregiving as well. Another story of that, of intense, dedicated caregiving. And I had expected her parents might have some bitterness or feel cheated in a way by Ashley's illness and the influence that it had on their lives. But when I visited them, they were also, like Doris had been, just so full of love and joy, and so happy with life in general, that it amazed me that they didn't have a trace at all of bitterness or disappointment about the way things had turned out. They took me in to meet Ashley, who was in her bedroom in a hospital bed, and she was not awake at the time, and she was rarely awake. So I was there to just examine her and see where she was in her dying process. And as I listened to her heart and lungs, I talked to her, which I always did to every patient, to tell them what I'm doing and why, so they would know why I was there. And when I finished my exam, Ashley opened her eyes and looked directly at me and smiled and said, "I love you." And I instantly felt like this electricity go through me from this look on her face and those words that she spoke to me. It was incredible. And I turned and looked at her parents. They were in the doorway watching, and they were both smiling at me. And they said, Do you see what a joy it's been for us to take care of her all these years?" And they said, "Those are the only 3 words that she can speak. I love you." And she said, but they said, when we bring people into the room to meet her, she nearly always will wake up and open her eyes and say that to the people who come here. And so it was profound to me that here she is, like, she's changing people's lives. She's blessing people with love, and she's confined to a hospital bed, and she has the cognitive ability of a 2-year-old. And so she is fulfilling her purpose in life. Like, this has to be her purpose, and she's fulfilling it. It reminded me, at least, that we don't have to have an able body. We don't have to have an education. We don't have to have specific training. We don't have to have special abilities to fulfill our purpose. Like, our purpose can be something as simple as utilizing whatever we have, whatever gifts we have that we can share, being willing to share them. And for Ashley, it was to smile and say, I love you.
Well, that is just so beautiful, Karen, because there's so much pressure, I said, that people put on, and that story and what you've just said about just being who you are can have that depth of an impact, and aligning with that, the gift and the uniqueness of what you bring. It's a beautiful reflection, I think, for people to take away and integrate into their own discovery and their journey, right? What that means.
Yeah, and to take the pressure off of finding exactly the right job or getting the right education. But in some ways, if we step back a little bit and view it as it's something much more about what is in my heart that I can share. What did I bring with me? What did I come here with that I can share with the world? And then there are lots of jobs I could do. There are lots of career paths I could follow that might allow me to share what I have, to share my gifts and what I have to bring. And we don't have to find just one right thing to do with our time.
I saw a quote, well, I actually saw him speaking, and a quote from Steven Spielberg recently, and the kids had asked him about his path, and he was doing this presentation to a group of people, and he said, people think this comes, I'm not quoting him directly, I'm apologizing here, but people think the dream comes right at you, straight at you. But he said often it comes from behind, and he speaks of listening to the whispers. That it often comes in whispers. It's not loud, it doesn't shout, and you have to learn to listen to your intuition in the whispers. And when you hear it, and he says it tickles your heart, and then you follow it, then we all benefit, right? And I apologize for not quoting him exactly, but I just love the way he presented it as a whisper, and to lean into that.
Yeah, and I can relate to that sometimes you hear the whisper and it doesn't make any sense. And you wonder, because that's actually how I got involved in hospice, is kind of hearing some intuitive guidance that I should call hospice. But at the time, I didn't even know what hospice did. I knew nothing about hospice and didn't know what that would mean or why I should do it. But that was the guidance. And thank goodness that I listened to it and I followed it. And that's happened a number of times in my life. I'm sure in yours too. Sometimes for some reason you're led somewhere or on a path somewhere and that you were not expecting at all. And that doesn't make logical sense, but there you are.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. That's beautiful. And aren't we blessed that you listen to that whisper because of all the amazing work that you've done? I mean, we're just so grateful. I mean, I think that was his point too, when you actually do lean into it and catch it, and it is aligned with the essence of who you are, it ripples out in ways that you can't even see, right? And the gift it gives others, and the uniqueness of your own heart and expression at play.
Yeah, it's so true. And that has been for me all along, writing books and doing the podcast, having no idea. Will anyone read what I write? Will anyone listen to what I say? But understanding I don't need to know that. It's okay. I need to do what I'm inspired to do. And who knows, if one person reads it or listens, that's fine. And being willing to do it because I know it's what I'm supposed to do, not attaching an outcome to that.
Well, that's art at its highest, right? It comes from an expression from within you and your heart, and you put it on the canvas, and some will appreciate it, some may not. But it's an expression of something deep within you that you need to share, right? So it's beautiful. So the loving kindness blessing, you share the loving kindness blessing. What has the loving kindness blessing taught you?
Well, it's an interesting little story that it came into my life on a day when I was really angry, and I had to make a visit to the husband of a hospice patient in a nursing home. And that loving kindness blessing I had written in the back of my planner several years before when I was at a conference, and I'd never looked at it again or thought of it again. And it's from Buddhism, the Buddhist metta, it's called in Buddhism, METTA, or also called the loving kindness blessing. But I copied it down because I thought it was lovely, but then never looked at it. And on the day I was on my way to the nursing home, my planner fell open and to that page where the loving kindness blessing was written. And I was angry at the man I was going to visit. And I knew right away, well, this is what I'm supposed to say this blessing, because that's why it fell open. This is what I need right now. And so it was just like a lovely little prayer or a mantra that moved me into a totally different space, out of my anger and out of my frustration with this man, into a place of peace and loving kindness, basically being able to experience compassion for him. And it totally changed how I interacted with him. And because of that, the loving kindness blessing is now something I just use all the time and say to myself all the time when I'm in situations. So I can say it if you want me to.
Yeah, if you want to share it, it's lovely. Yeah.
There are a lot of different versions of the loving kindness blessing, but this is the one that I learned. So the verses are, may I be at peace. May my heart remain open. May I realize the beauty of my own true nature. May I be healed, and may I be a source of healing for this world. So there are a few things that stand out about that to me. The idea that I need to heal myself. I need to see my own beauty and heal myself before I expect to go out into the world to heal other people. And that was really profound for me, that if I'm angry about something and I'm holding on to that and carrying it in my heart, I'm not in the best position to be a healer for anyone else. I have to fix what's happening in me before I go out into the world. So that little blessing, it's just made a huge difference to me in all kinds of situations. I repeat it for myself, and then sometimes I say it for the other person as well. May you be at peace. May your heart be open, as a blessing for them also, to hopefully help them get into a better place energetically and spiritually.
Well, and you've put that in the section on surrender. So is that, sounds like it's a celebration and a way to help you in a moment just to let go and surrender to what's happening more fully.
Yes. For me, that's, I guess I would say that's how I use it in the moment, to say, I can't hold on to how I thought things should be. And if I'm upset because I don't like what's happening right now, I wanted it to be different, then I need to get myself back into a place of peace and a place of acceptance. And that's how I will be able to make a difference from that mindset and that point of view.
Right. Okay. So we're going through 7 principles, and through the weave of the story we've done that. We can summarize them in a minute, but the last one, I'm going to ask you a little bit of a different question. What has the permanence of death taught you about life?
Well, I think that's been a crucial lesson for me, and in a sense for all the other lessons, is figuring out that death is always part of life, that everything that lives will one day die, and that I have to turn my vision around. Instead of seeing that as a tragedy, seeing it as a blessing, in a sense that I can appreciate things even more because I know that they're fleeting and fragile and they won't be here forever. And so it helps me view each moment, like we were talking about in the present moment, as something I need to enjoy this right now because it won't last. And I need to experience this moment fully because this is the only time it will be here for me. And even being with other people, sometimes when I'm sitting with another person, I think we will never repeat this moment again. This, you and I, we won't be here exactly as we are right now ever again. Even if we scheduled another conversation, it will be totally different. It won't be what this moment is. And so the fact that everything will ultimately die helps me value it that much more while I have it and while it's here.
Can you just do a summary of the 7 principles in there? And because we've woven them through the stories, but can you just name them so we have a
Yes.
summary of that reflection? You elaborate more beautifully and fully in the book, but just highlight the seven key lessons.
Yeah, it starts with the first lesson is the lesson of suffering, because really it's usually our suffering that wakes us up or that brings us to a place where we start searching for something more spiritual, for some sort of depth in our life, or just to find meaning and to understand what's happening to us. So I think suffering is the point at which we begin these journeys of ours. And the next lesson is the lesson of love, because it's love that helps us through the suffering. When we learn to focus on love, that takes the sting away from the suffering that we have, and that can inspire us and propel us forward as we continue to grow and learn. And then forgiveness follows after love, because no matter who we love, we will always need to find forgiveness, because we humans will disappoint one another, and life itself will disappoint us in certain ways. And so forgiveness is necessary in order to love more deeply. And so I view those two as being tied together, love and forgiveness. And the fourth lesson is that lesson of presence that we talked about. But I actually learned the more we are able to forgive the past, the more we actually can be in the present moment, because we're not constantly thinking about something that happened yesterday and wishing it had been different. We can bring our energy into where we are right now and make the most of this moment if our thoughts and our energy are not tied up in the past. So the present moment is the next thing that comes to us that we can learn about and master. And that leads us directly into purpose again, because our purpose is really what we bring to the world when we are fully present in this moment. That is our true and deepest purpose for life. And the next one, the sixth lesson, is surrender, as you were mentioning, that we have to let go of how we thought things should be or what we were expecting or hoping for in order to appreciate what actually is right now in this moment. And then finally, the impermanence again. And so that's kind of the underlying realization that all of this is fleeting. We only have it for a moment. So enjoy what it is. Enjoy each moment of it. And I just yesterday I found a poem, and she was writing about a wisp of smoke, sea foam when it washes up on the beach, and how fleeting, how those things are. We can only see them for a second, or the bubbles in a glass of champagne that disappear so quickly. To like notice those things and enjoy those things, and that's what makes life so much richer and so much filled with joy for us and gratitude.
Beautiful, beautiful lessons. So I don't think I've seen too many people ask you this question, so I'm kind of excited to ask you. You have amazing dreams. You're a lucid dreamer. You have a wonderful dream life. How has that helped you how has that helped you?
In so many wonderful ways, because from the time I was even a child, I had dreams at crucial moments, I think, when there was something I needed to understand or something that was hurting me. And so I had a powerful dream after my friend died when we were 29. It was a few years later, but I had a powerful dream about her, and dreams of my father after he died, dreams of my patients, but even dreams where I was being shown things and taught things. And so for me, it's been clear my dreams are a pathway for messages to get to me that I need to understand. And they almost always come right at the moment when I'm kind of lost. I'm a little bit lost in despair or pain or discouragement. Somehow a dream will come and it has answers in it for me, but sometimes also it has questions questions that I know, like, okay, I need to figure this out. And so it's been really powerful for me, and such a blessing in my life.
So do you keep dream journals?
I have in the past, and I should start that again, because I was thinking the other day, I don't remember as many of my dreams as I used to, but I realize the dream journal is really key because it's kind of honoring the dream by saying, you're so important, I'm writing you down, and that helps tell our minds to remember the dream. So
Mhm. Well, it's just beautiful how you weave that into your writings and your books, and how it, it just, you can just see within the experience how profound it is in helping you heal and have deeper insights. So I love the fact you celebrate that in your writing, so people can see a different perspective of working with all the dimensions of life, right?
yeah, yeah. And there was a time in my hospice work when I would dream of patients who were very near death, but in each case, I would see the patient as whole. I would see them as younger and perfectly whole and healthy. And in fact, these were patients I didn't know what they looked like when they were younger. And it wasn't until I made a visit to their home and I saw pictures of them when they were younger, I realized that's who I saw. That's who was in my dream. And so it told me that even with a patient that was comatose, there was still a way to genuinely connect with the soul and the essence of that person. And it was happening through my dreams.
Lovely. Well, you hear the dying individual or the person, we're all going to die, but the people facing end of life sometimes seeing loved ones coming to greet them that are very real, or the bereaved having strong
Mhm.
dreams. You've just done a podcast with Dr. Joss Black highlighting that. But we don't often hear about the people around the individuals caring for them, having the unique and beautiful experience of their own dreams enlivened as they engage with individuals in that very beautiful mystery and depth of transition, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah. In one case, there was a dream I had of a young man who died of AIDS, but it was just a lovely dream of dancing with him on the top of a restaurant, a circular restaurant, a revolving restaurant on the top of a tall building, and dancing with him. And the sky was full of stars, and we were spinning around and dancing. And then the building disappeared, and we were just dancing in the stars. And then he left. He just faded away. And I knew when I woke up, I have to tell this dream to his family. And I thought, how can I ever tell them that I had a dream? Like, it seems inappropriate. Who am I to have a dream of their son? But I went to his funeral, and afterwards, as we were seated at the table, I just knew they need to hear my dream. And I told them the dream, and they all started crying, and they said, oh my gosh, he loved dancing. He loved to dance. And so they came away, they were elated. They said that helped us more than anything to hear your dream. And now we will always have this vision of him dancing through the stars. And so dancing with the stars, I guess that's what I didn't think of that. But so then I realized, oh, maybe sometimes the dream is not only for me. Maybe it is intended to be shared, because it can help other people too.
well, and beautifully said that we keep these experiences inside sometimes, and then when you do share, how beautifully it touches others and can help to heal in your example, right? So. So we're coming to the end. How has your heart been changed by this work?
Well, I've really come to change how I live, I guess, day to day by learning about the dying process and death and dying and how precious life is. It's really helped me, I think, change all of my priorities and what I do in life. Not that I'm great at it all the time, but to work much harder to be present and to be forgiving and to maximize time with the people I love and make sure I talk to them and I'm reaching out to them and we're spending time together. And even I have a family member who's very different from me, and we kind of view the world from completely different frameworks. But I know that I need to keep loving him and stay close to him and see him as much as I can and put all of our differences aside, because that's one of those things that really matters in life, is maintaining those connections. So this work has just helped me understand how to live my life in a better way than I was before, I guess.
Well, thank you for that. And I am so grateful for you coming on the show today and sharing your wisdom. And for people who want to learn more about your books and your writings, I mean, you've got the books on the back shelf there. The 7 Lessons of Living from Dying, which we were weaving through the principles and some of the stories today. It's a beautiful book. And I know will help many. There's a more recent one, The Journey from Ego to Soul. But you also have an amazing podcast. And I was talking to you before we started. It's the End of Life University podcast with a phenomenal library of conversations that you have recorded. So I will put the link at the bottom on the YouTube for people to go to your site for the books, but for the resource of the amazing work that you've done in these conversations to help people.
Yes, I have over 300 podcasts now, episodes. So it could take someone a while. If you want to spend some time listening, there's plenty there that you can find.
Well, I've taken in many of them just out of interest, and they're wonderful. You're a wonderful host. And I know to do that came from your heart initially, sort of stepping into a new realm of trying to open this conversation more. And I just want to applaud you for the courage of the young doctor speaking out innocently about love.
Yes.
To how that translated to the Love Project and to all the beautiful work that you're doing to help people become educated and seen and working to make this transition less threatening and a little softer, because it's such a tender life transition.
Thank you so much. And I still realize, like, the most important thing I could do is just to try to bring love to wherever I am. But I want to thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. And we've had a wonderful conversations before, and we have a lot in common. And I really appreciate that you are doing these heart-centered interviews and spending time with people just to go deep and really talk about these subjects. It's so powerful.
Oh, thank you so much. And again, thank you for coming on. And everyone, her books on the back shelf, will send you to her website, The 7 Lessons of Living from the Dying, and the beautiful podcast. Please follow through and hear more of what Karen's doing. So thank you again for coming on today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Barbara.
Okay.